And here's a quick look at our agenda for today's session. We'll be walking through our project background, study design and methods, key findings, a discussion, and then wrapping up with a final conclusion. But before we dive in, I did want to acknowledge my grandmother, Alicia, who's been living with Alzheimer's for over a decade now, and she was a significant inspiration for this project. But okay, let's talk about young caregivers. Who are they? Young caregivers are people under the age of 25 years who provide significant voluntary care to someone living with a debilitating condition. This care can include practical, financial, and even emotional care. And it's predicted that over 1.25 million young caregivers in Canada aged 15 to 24 provide some form of unpaid care. And our project is focused specifically on young dementia caregivers, or YDCs as we'll call them. Dementia is an umbrella term for health conditions that impair cognitive function and interfere with daily life. Over 560,000 Canadians are currently living with dementia, and given the aging population, this number is expected to rise significantly. And YDCs play a crucial yet often overlooked role in dementia care provision. So to understand the challenges facing YDCs, we conducted an environmental scan of the problem space, which involved two main things. The first was to review existing literature and research, and then also to have exploratory conversations with experts in the dementia space. From the scan, we selected one need to be the main focus of our project based on things like feasibility, impact, and availability of resources. And this all led us to the following need problem statement of our project, which is that there is a need to improve the social connection of young dementia caregivers to reduce their caregiving burden and improve the provision of dementia care. So what does that mean? Well, social connection is defined as how people connect and relate to one another. And it's made up of multiple dimensions as shown in this conceptual framework, which was developed by colleagues at the University of Toronto. You can see that there are both objective and subjective aspects of social connection. Objective aspects at the top there include things like social engagement, which are community activities, social support, which are the exchange of resources, and social networks, which are the web of relationships surrounding a person. Whereas the subjective aspects at the bottom are based more on features of close, meaningful relationships. And so this framework was used as a guiding tool throughout the project to both understand and conceptualize different aspects of social connection and how those apply to our target population of YDCs. Another thing that we found from our scan is that YDCs face unique challenges, both as young caregivers and as dementia caregivers, which can decrease their social connection. As young carers, they may face barriers to communicating their needs due to negative emotions like shame, guilt, and frustrations. And as dementia caregivers, they also generally dedicate more time to caregiving compared to caregivers of other health conditions, which reduce their opportunities to engage in social activities. And so increasing social connection for YDCs can reduce their caregiving burden and improve the care that they provide to their loved ones. Now let me outline our study design and objectives. So our study consisted of two consecutive phases of exploratory and co-design. And the objective of phase one was to explore how YDCs in Ontario experience social connection, which led us to phase two. And the objective of this was to engage YDCs in the processes of co-design to develop a resource to improve their social connection. And in terms of our participants, these were people aged 18 to 30 years old who were residents of Ontario and have been providing informal, unpaid care to someone with dementia over the past 3 years. We'll also mention that we excluded individuals who had formal caregiving experience, such as part of their education, volunteering, or extracurriculars. So with phase one, the objective was again to explore how YDCs in Ontario experience social connection. To do this, we held 3 virtual focus groups with a total of 15 YDCs, 5 in each focus group. And in these focus groups, we investigated the 5 W's and 1 H of social connection. We asked, what does it look like? Who's involved? When, where, and how does social connection happen? And why is social connection important? We then recorded the discussions verbatim and used the deductive approach of directed content analysis, in which we use the social connection framework to guide our coding and analyses. And from this, we identified 4 key themes, which we'll discuss in the next slides.
So to start off with theme 1, this was consistent with the original framework. YDCs describe both objective and subjective aspects of social connection. Some YDCs noted that while they may objectively spend more time with a certain person, this does not automatically constitute a meaningful or deep relationship. For example, one of the participants indicated that you could be at work with the same people for hours and days, but not have a connection with them. Here, participants showed that connections are not solely based on physical proximity. On the other hand, most participants placed more value on the subjective aspects of social connection that led to more meaningful relationships, such as vulnerability, openness, and trust. One participant said that they valued relationships where you wouldn't feel judged and that they could share things in their life that are painful. From our analysis, participants prioritized the quality of their relationships, and when they had meaningful relationships, they felt comfortable in being able to share their caregiving experiences. The second theme which we found is also consistent with the original framework, and it's that YDCs experience both barriers and facilitators to social connection, and these are influenced by their caregiving duties. One of these barriers was time constraints. YDCs have multiple overlapping responsibilities in addition to their caregiving role, such as being students, employees, family members, and more. Now, these scheduling and time constraints reduce their opportunities for social connection. One participant described that it was difficult to find time due to caring for her grandmother, which hindered her ability to connect with others. Another participant struggled to maintain their relationships with their friends due to their responsibilities providing care to their grandfather and not being able to go out as much or have their friends over. Overall, participants described that the time associated with their caregiving limited their ability to socially connect with friends or others outside their families. Now, while time constraints were a barrier, participants also described things that facilitated social connection. For example, having interests or experiences that were similar to caregiving helped YDCs form both faster and/or deeper relationships with others. Interestingly, as one person pointed out, you don't need to have the exact same experiences, but just having a commonality or overlap in their understanding helped them form stronger relationships faster. Now, for the third and fourth themes, we adapted the original social connection framework to incorporate two changes, which are highlighted in pink on the left and on the right. Both Theme 3 and Theme 4 were not included in the original framework. The addition of these are based on our focus group analyses. Theme 3 focused on the influence of caregiving-related mediators. The word mediators refers to factors that can have both a positive or negative influence on social connection. In the adapted framework, you can see these outlined on the left. These mediators were highly variable in how they influence an individual's social connection, since they were dependent on the YDC and their specific caregiving context and role. While one mediator may positively affect one caregiver, it may negatively influence the social connection of another caregiver. For example, one of the mediators was moral obligation in reference to their care recipient. One participant described their disconnection with their care recipient, even to the point where they felt they could be almost anyone at that point, and that this made them the most upset. While they still held a moral obligation to their care recipient, having these thoughts about their relationship caused them to feel disconnected and hindered their ability to socially connect with their loved one. The same mediator of moral obligation influenced another caregiver differently. They described that their care recipient was their best friend and described spending quality time with them, even if it was simply just sitting down at the couch with them and watching some movies. This same YDC also stated that they had a strong support system as it was prevalent in their culture. And culture is also another mediator. While a mediator in isolation, such as moral obligation, still does have an influence on social connection, it is important to take into account the overarching effects of various mediators as together they influence social connection. The other addition that we made to our framework was affordance. Affordance is a health design concept that is defined as how something can possibly be used. In the framework, you can see the affordances of social connection are to the right. In our focus groups, we ask participants what social connection enables them to do and or feel, and these represented the results or the effects of social connection. On the slide, you can see a word cloud of different responses that participants provided. To highlight a few, caregivers stated that social connection helped them feel empowered, validated, and understood. And this theme was significant because it verified that social connection is important for YDCs. But more than that, people get different things from being socially connected. Through these focus groups, we established a foundation of knowledge of YDCs and their experiences with social connection. From there, our next objective in phase 2 was to build upon this evidence base to begin developing a resource to improve social connection.
In this phase of the project, as we move from exploratory to co-design, our main objective was to develop a resource to improve social connection for YDCs. To do so, we facilitated an online co-design workshop with 7 YDCs. 5 of these individuals were returning from phase 1, and 2 were new participants. In the workshop, we engaged YDCs in the process of co-design by acquiring their ideas, insights, and feedback on how to improve social connection. We conducted different activities to probe their ideas in depth and cultivate their creativity, and we facilitated the workshop on Miro, which is an online collaborative platform. Then we used the workshop's finding to develop criteria for an effective intervention to improve social connection. Then based on these criteria, we voted on an intervention concept, which we will describe later. Now I'm going to walk you through the activities from co-design workshop and share sample results. For our first activity, we asked participants if you were using a tool aiming to improve social connection of YDCs, what features should it have? Our participants provided their answers on sticky notes, and they were asked to share their rationales through verbal discussion. For example, one of the answers was that they want to connect with other caregivers because they share similar experiences. However, when they were discussing these particular results, they mentioned that it shouldn't be all about caregiving. Sometimes they need a break, and they should be able to bond over other things. Our second activity, our participants ranked each of their previous responses based on their perceived level of importance. This ranking system sorted features that are absolutely necessary, such as being low cost, from features that are helpful but not mandatory, such as age-appropriate resources, and features that are nice to have, such as educational material for younger YDCs. As expected, there was not an absolute agreement on the ranking between everyone, which speaks to the subjective nature of this topic. However, these discussions were very fruitful and we captured valuable data from them. For example, how it can be a deal breaker if YDCs cannot continuously engage with the resource while providing care. In the next activity, we asked participants to think of as many bad ideas to improve social connection as they could. We reminded them, since all of these ideas are bad, they can write down whatever comes to their mind and don't worry about the rest. As you can see here, our participants had fun with this activity and multiple bad ideas were added to the board, such as making a dementia caregiver rock band or locking caregivers in a jail cell to force them to socially connect. And in our final activity, we asked the participant, how can we turn these bad ideas into good ideas? For example, one of the previous ideas was caregiver bar hopping. First, we asked, what makes this idea bad? One answer was that it's not inclusive for people who don't drink alcohol. Next, we asked, what aspects of this idea are good? An example answer is that it can be a fun, leisurely activity. Finally, our participants combined these responses and turned caregiver bar hopping into unique social events that suit the group's interests. After the workshop, our team gathered all of our findings to select an intervention. To do so, we established selection criteria based on the needs and values of YDCs and created a voting matrix based on the results of focus group and the co-design workshop. Then, according to the criteria, we scored the interventions that we found through our environmental scan. Some examples of our selection criteria are user-friendliness and inclusive environment, and some examples of existing interventions are social activities such as hiking groups and peer-to-peer mentorship. Using this scoring system, Allison, Ty, and I independently scored each intervention concept. Then we deliberated on design and functionality and came up with the concept that we would like to develop beyond this project. Our proposed intervention involves a partnership with ordinary caregiver organization in which we will be adapting an existing one-on-one mentorship resource that we offer to young caregivers. Our proposed intervention is an online platform to match YDCs across Ontario. Through this resource, YDCs will be able to build a profile by inputting their caregiving experience, such as dementia stage of the care recipient, as well as what they are seeking in terms of social connection, for example, education, leisure, or exploring hobbies. Afterwards, a team member will facilitate the matching process based on similarities and interests. Overall, the platform will enable peer-to-peer and group connection for various purposes tailored to the needs of each YDC. Our teams intend on bringing knowledge to action by building this evidence-based resource through collaboration with the OCO. The selection of intervention concept concludes our project's finding in this program.
So now that we've covered the main findings of the project, we now wanted to discuss 2 cross-cutting themes that were relevant throughout our research project. And the first there is engaging a hidden population. So young caregivers have been called a hidden population due to the challenges in identifying them and the lack of awareness of their needs and experiences. And we found that this was also the case for our population of YDCs. And these barriers took different forms, from ethnocultural influences to personal perceptions of the caregiving role. Despite these barriers, we engaged with more than 20 YDCs across the province in just a few months, which we feel is an accomplishment in and of itself. And to that end, we propose a few recommendations on how to effectively engage with hidden, underrepresented populations. The first was to use multiple channels of engagement to maximize reach. We used a multi-pronged recruitment strategy, which included posters, emails, social media, and a website. The second is to tailor your message to your audience. So when recruiting, we stayed away from terms like caregiver or young caregiver, which don't always resonate with people, and instead asked, do you provide care to someone with dementia? It's a subtle change, but can make a difference in how the message is interpreted and communicated. And finally, leverage the expertise of champions and personal connections. Their influence was often the difference maker to motivate people to join our research project. The second discussion point is that social connection was found to be different for all YDCs. For some, it was as simple as having an intimate one-on-one conversation with a close friend, while others preferred group activities like team sports or nature foraging. Many also shared the sentiment that social connection does not always have to happen in the context of being a dementia caregiver, which was an important reminder that these individuals are more than just their caregiving role. And overall, this theme had tangible implications for our intervention concepts, which will aim to address the different forms of social connection that YDC seek, whether it is, again, mentorship, creative outlets, or simply just leisure time. And this theme was also a reminder that effective interventions are, of course, not a one-size-fits-all, but instead are personalized and tailored to the needs of each individual. So before we wrap up, we did want to highlight some key knowledge translation activities that we were involved with throughout our project. Overall, we wanted to drive impact in this field beyond just our graduate program at UofT, and we did this by presenting at 3 research conferences, 2 regional and 1 international, and we also engaged the community through a mental health podcast, a photo contest, and an advocacy initiative through the Alzheimer's Society of Canada. Overall, these activities helped us raise awareness about YDCs and sparked opportunities for knowledge sharing and collaboration.
So what are our next steps? As mentioned, we will continue developing our intervention with the Ontario Caregivers organization, and we're also exploring some other partnerships as well. If this is of interest to anyone in the audience, please feel free to reach out. Additionally, we hope to publish our findings in a research journal. Finally, we'll continue our knowledge translation and exchange by presenting at an Age Well webinar this fall and contributing to a national campaign on young caregivers through the Alzheimer's Society of Canada. To conclude our presentation, here is a recap of our project. YDCs in Ontario articulate and experience social connection in unique ways. Barriers and facilitators can either prevent or encourage social connection. It is important to engage YDCs in co-design as it enables them to reflect on and voice their values. And improving YDC social connection can reduce caregiving burden and have positive impacts on their caregiving role and the provision of dementia care overall. Caring for Carers sets a precedent for increased awareness to YDCs and to develop personalized resources and supports that address their needs. Thank you so much to everyone who contributed to this research project, our supervisors, advisory committee, and many more. We truly appreciate all of your support, advice, and guidance as we sought to make an impact in the YDC population. Thank you so much, and we welcome any questions that you may have.